Jolly's Pharmacy presents a new and innovative radio program, Health Vibes. Health Vibes. Every Wednesday morning on Q95 FM. Health Vibes. Hosted by Carlton Lando and Pearl Fontaine Butler. Health Vibes from 10:15 to 11 a.m. It's not just your average talk show. It's appealing and educational with a bit of humor. Real vibes on your health. Now that's the vibe. Health Vibes on Q95 every Wednesday from 10:15 to 11 a.m. with Pearl and Carlton. Tune in.
Welcome to Health Vibes, Dominica's most foremost program on health, medicine, nutrition, and wellness, featuring the latest news on conventional and alternative medicine and health care. Now, here's your host, Carlton Lando, and co-host, Pearl Fontaine Butler.
Good morning to you. I believe that everyone is feeling the bliss of Christmas. I mean, the rain is coming. We're hearing all this music and people are getting in the mood for Christmas. It's Christmas week and we are so happy to be joining you today on this rainy day for another episode of Health Vibes. We have a very interesting topic, Pearl, this morning.
Yes, we do.
We did say that school is off, so we anticipate that all parents are at home, particularly the moms, would be home at this time, those who are not working, and would want to really have the children around with you as we discuss
sexual education and how we discuss with our children about sex. How do we have the talk? How do we introduce? How do we empower our parents to be able to have the conversation? Mm-hmm. And it's a very hot topic.
Very hot topic.
Very
Pearl,
hot topic.
I remember, even growing up, you became an adolescent at 13, 14, and your mother would say, anyway, you big now. I just don't bring no child for me. End of story.
But that's very true, because I was raised with my grandmother, and she, when I told her that I had first gotten my period, she said, anyway, don't let no man jump on your back. And I'm thinking, jump on my back? Mom, I don't let anybody jump on my back. What's that mean? And then later on, I realized what she was saying. You've got to don't let no man. I'm thinking, jump on my back? Where do you get this from? But I totally understood it a few years later,
So we'll be looking at these types of scenarios and how relevant are they now, and are they applicable to what's happening now?
But they most certainly are, because Dominica very recently joined with the international community in recognizing International Day to Reject Violence Against Women and Girls. And out of that came the observance of 16 days of activism to highlight the international campaign to end violence against women and girls. We're not focusing so much on the violence against women and girls. But what I wanted to highlight was during those 16 days of activism, we saw hundreds of posts on Facebook from the Leve Dominic campaign where women and a few men told their stories of sexual abuse. So we at Jolly's, we've recognized that this conversation needs to be had. It's extremely important in order for us to move forward as a healthy Dominica. How do we arm our children with the necessary tools, wisdom, and know-how? How do we empower our parents to have the talk? And today, we have Dr. Sybil Allen Jones and Dr. Lisa Jolly here with us to do just that, to empower you parents, to empower our children, because really and truly it's necessary. And what I wanted to point out was some research that I found. Research conducted by the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, estimated that approximately 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. And that's very important to know. But here in our small island, we've seen and heard of many allegations over the past month, and what's concerning is it's not about strangers anymore. It's about the people that they know, that they're very familiar with, and so we are here to have that talk today.
We have a caller. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, caller.
Once in Royal David City. The lonely cattle shed.
Thank you for good Christmas warm
cheer.
Happy holiday to you and yours.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays to you, my friend.
Boss, and to the staff at Jolly's, and to you wonderful people.
Thank you.
I can remember I learned a few weeks before your people here in Barbershop became a young lady. From my friends, I didn't know because my great aunt raised me, and she was in age, so she never really learn me anything. I had to learn the hard way. I learned from my friends outside. What heard things from you. I can remember when my cousin was having baby, you see the midwife come in with a small suitcase, and they would say that the baby came in a suitcase. So I felt that the baby came in a suitcase. So. But no, to me, I find that now the children, you're teaching the children, you are telling them all kind of things, and the things that you're teaching them against, they're going and doing so. I don't know, but I know y'all always have interesting topics. Last week I was unable to think because I was, all in pain and had to be sleeping and thing. But I'm glad this morning, and thank God I'm alive and that I could listen to y'all. So take care. All the best for the season. Sorry, I was supposed to be in Dominica. I'm sorry that I'm not there, but next year, if God's willing, I'll be there. So take care until.
I know. Yes, thank you.
Right,
so,
bye-bye.
Pearl, we have, as you said, Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones is a registered psychologist, and we have Dr. Lisa Jolly, who is a medical doctor, as our guest today, as we will be discussing
That's right.
how do we really introduce, how do we begin the dialogue of talking about sex and sexuality to our children. And I think, it's a very timely discourse
Absolutely.
to be having, particularly for us who are parents, because even for me as a pharmacist and as a father, the way I may converse the sexual talk with my children may not even be the right way to do it. And so that's why I'm glad that we have an expert who would be able to teach us the right way, because we might think, well, we're saying the right things, the right grammar and everything, but the content may not necessarily be the right one for that child at that age.
Right, and there's so much to navigate through in this subject. So I think, we've cut out news for today because this is such an important topic. Dr. Jones, how do we approach the topic, and at what stage should we begin the conversation?
Okay, well, welcome, Dominicans. And yes, I actually came through the whole, all the taxi drivers out there singing Christmas carols for our visitors, which was just beautiful. I mean, it's it just tells you about the beauty and the wealth of Dominicans, eh? Okay, so it's really about sexuality. And the thing is, we can tell a lot about a culture by the things that we talk about or the things that we leave out. So I was thinking about this, and there's a very popular children's song that we teach children, very young children: head and shoulders, knees and toes, eyes, ears, mouth and nose. What are we forgetting in that song?
Yeah.
That's right.
The middle part of our body, our bums, our breasts, our penises, our vulvas, never comes into the conversation. But we're trying to teach children about their
Body
bodies.
parts.
So when we leave that out, we're saying to the child, ooh, that must be something that we shouldn't talk about, or we shouldn't even have a name for, or nobody's even identifying it. Very, very important, the things that we don't say. So the thing about sexuality is that the conversation can start from very young. You're teaching them about the body, so add those parts when you're teaching them. You're changing their diaper. You are, talking about, they're seeing their cousin who's a girl and they're a boy, and they're seeing this, body part that's sticking out for boys. It's a penis. Girls, however, don't get to see their vulva or
That's
their
right.
vagina. And even many women have not seen their body parts, those body parts. And they refuse to even look at it. I've done workshops where we actually encourage women to look at their body parts, because there's a lot of shame around that. There's a lot of, but whereas when we bring that shame, so if I talk about my head, I should be talking about the penis just with the same less emotion. Yeah,
That's right.
shoulders,
That's
pen,
right.
penis,
Without the mystery.
without the mystery.
Right.
And the thing about it, we even have names for it: private parts.
Yes.
Now, or special parts that we might say. Now, the private piece is important because what we want to teach children is that there's certain parts of their bodies that people shouldn't be touching. And so they need to know that. The important thing, too, is that kids need to have that information, because if they don't have that information, then they're more vulnerable to the possibility of sexual abuse.
Absolutely.
So sometimes we think if we don't tell them that we're actually introducing things that they shouldn't know about, but we really need to inform them so that they can protect themselves. And that's a very important part. And also, you mentioned about strangers. It was never about strangers. It's always been about people they know. So that whole idea of a stranger versus someone, it's more likely that that abuse will happen with someone the child knows.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, but that's kind of how it is, and always has been,
That's right.
So the thing is, you can start by talking about the body parts, and then you can also start by if you're watching a TV show and you see somebody kissing, you could say, have you, if your child is like 10 or 11 years, have you ever been kissed? Have you been kissed by a boy? Have you kissed a boy? Of course, in communities like us, we don't want to talk about boys kissing boys or girls kissing girls, because that brings in a whole other issue around sexual orientation, which we often don't want to even deal with in our communities. But that's also real. So again, we have many opportunities, teaching opportunities every day, and we need to use those opportunities to educate our children. The thing about it, too, is that kids, it's natural for them to explore their bodies. So they're going to be walking around and they're going to be touching themselves or touching their penis, touching their vagina. And the thing about it is that self-stimulation feels good. So the child will be doing that. But it's not about sex for them.
Yeah.
It's about exploring their bodies. They're like scientists, and they really want to just sort of figure it out. I had a really wonderful story that I had heard some years ago from a daycare teacher, where they caught the kids playing what they call doctor. Where they go into the closet and they were 3 and 4 year olds, they took off their clothes, went into the closet, and they were like missing, and they were like, where are the kids? So they opened up the closet door, and there they are, naked, and exploring each other's bodies. 3 and 4 year olds. It's not about sex. It's a girl and a boy. They want to see what the differences are in their bodies. Okay.
But then my concern would be, why would they go into the closet at that point?
Because they know that if they were to do it out in the public, that the teachers wouldn't allow that, for example. So when they opened up the closet door, the teacher said, oh no, you can't do that. You can't do that here. So the little boy said, when I'm at home, my mom says I can't do it at home. When I'm in school, you tell me I can't do it in school. So how am I going to find out about my body? A very good insight, because we forbid.
Right, but then the education has to begin at home. I've had a series of conversations with my son, and from the time he could walk, luckily for me, he's very independent. So he wants to shower, he wants to bathe himself. During those times is where I have those conversations.
Yes.
This is your penis. In Dominica, we call it a tultu, or some people refer to it as their wood, right? In England, they call it a willy. These are the conversations I have, and nobody but you should touch this. Not even mommy and daddy. So the minute you can wash yourself, you go ahead and you do that, and I will teach you how to do that correctly.
Yeah.
The conversation has to begin from very young, and he knows that. He is very aware of his body parts, his private parts. We have conversations about it, so nobody can come to him and say, listen, let me touch your willy, and he won't know what that means, and he'll be very clear to say, no, that's inappropriate.
And it's also beyond touch now these days, because people have phones, and so pictures. We have to be also telling children that no one's to take a picture of your body, or your whole body, and so that's another piece that parents need to be aware of now, that is something that can happen in those circumstances. Or a video, someone might want to take a video and then ask you to take off your clothes as a child. So again, those are things that are very, very important. The thing about it is you've got to start early. The earlier you start, the better. And the thing about it too is that we're often very uncomfortable about things like self-stimulation. So in the event that a child who's 3 or 4 is self-stimulating, at some point you can say to them, this is something that you can do, and it's an enjoyable thing, but you need to do that in private. So you're not going to be doing it in the middle of a family gathering. So you encourage the child, which kids do. I mean, they just, for them, remember, it's just exploring their body, and they don't have a sense of what's appropriate and inappropriate in a social setting. But you can then begin to start and set those limits with them, but not make them feel shameful about that process.
But Dr. Jones, I mean, I like the idea that you bringing this into the discussion, because one of the things you began the whole dialogue about culture and so forth. Religion also causes some sort of quote-unquote confusion sometimes to young people, particularly young children, because some churches preach that masturbation is a sin, and you exploring your body or you touching your body in that way to get an arousal is shameful and it's sinful.
Yep.
What do you know? I mean, how do you now navigate between the two?
Well, it's an important discussion for parents in terms of their own value system. I can't
Okay.
really tell
Okay.
people, so if you're, Catholicism is an interesting religion in the sense that it's one of the few religions where the people who actually are engaged in the religion, like priests, are actually told to deny a part of their own sexuality. And that's big. Most other churches allow preachers to have a wife, to have, a normal sexual relationship. Remember, our sexuality is like food and water. It's a biological need. So when you start with that, then you're creating issues around sexuality. And those are the same teachers who might then be telling you, if you're Catholic, that certain parts of your body are not necessarily acceptable, certain behaviors are not acceptable. That can put a lot of strain and stress on children and on parents. So you have to figure out how you then decide, if you've kind of bought into this religious perspective, what are you going to teach your child about the beauty of the body? Because again, the body comes from God, and so it's an incredible temple that's beautiful. But there are areas where we don't want to, sort of acknowledge those things.
We have a caller. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Carlton.
My
and
friend, how are you?
Fountain.
Good
And
morning.
I'm okay, and your guest.
Yes.
Now, let me ask a question. Is it a parent, both man and woman, child, boy child or girl child, in the house? Is it wrong for the parent to expose yourself at a very early age to the child?
That's a good question.
Because I'll give you my take on it, and then you will expound on it and, say whatever you think. I think it's probably a good thing in the sense that you are introducing the child to the different body parts at a very early age, and you are able to answer any question or any curiosity that may be aroused from the child. You are able to talk to the child, and you can ask any question. You may be able to discuss and already show the child exactly what's going on. That's my take on it.
But let me ask you, at what age though would you if your child, at what age would you stop? Let's say, or do you ever stop, or do you,
Well, let me tell you, I personally believe that a child begins to learn in the stomach. In the stomach, because I had that experience with my children. That when my wife was pregnant, I used to talk to the child while he was in the stomach. Call his name out, talk to him, and I was at delivery room when the child was being born. And as soon as the child came out, I called his name, and you will not believe me, that child his head stood up like a spear, looking for that voice, because he heard that voice before. So I don't think that there is a time, an early age, and once it's introduced to the child get used to it already. So it don't make a difference as to what then you stop.
Okay.
So
Because the child is already used to it.
So can I ask a question? For example, would you introduce, when you say you introduce the child to is it adult body parts or adult private parts? And are you talking about a 2-3-year-old, a 5 to 6-year-old, or is this a 10-year-old? At what ages would that be appropriate?
As early as possible, because the child is growing up seeing that and knowing that, and at a certain time the child may be curious as to what is that, what you do with that,
So
and then you can go ahead and explain to the child,
I understand where he's coming from. I think it has to do with the adult's level of comfortability when it comes to their bodies and their sexuality and who they are. And let's say, for instance, this particular man is taking a shower. The child happens to walk in the bathroom to get to use the toilet and happens to say, "Daddy, let me ask you a question," and opens a curtain. Listen, no, but there are children who do that. This is a scenario that happens so naturally. It does happen.
That's
Talking to daddy, and then you notice, wow, daddy has a penis.
Yes.
I have one too. Daddy, how comes yours is bigger than mine? No, children
That's
do
true.
ask these questions.
Yes.
right.
So,
And it is very important that each family decide about nudity. You know, do you walk around the house naked with your children? For some people, it's very comfortable. I mean, that's something that was very common in my household. What you will find is that the kids will tell you when they feel uncomfortable. So, in the sense of a mother with a son, after a while, they're going to say, "Mom, cover up," because then they start to feel a certain level of discomfort,
Right.
and that's when you sort of take that lead. But basically, it's up to each family to decide about their level of comfort around that. Now, when kids start to get towards adolescent age, they tend to get more shy and a little more concerned about that. So they're not going to be as comfortable with the parent necessarily walking around naked.
That's true.
So I have a question in that regard, because if we tell kids, for example, that no one should ask or touch or their private parts, then if we were to expose ourselves to them, how then do you differentiate that from a stranger or someone else who might be willing to abuse that child? For example, recently there was a case where I think it was there was an older male who was in the house, and he would expose himself to the lady's daughter, you know, and she was about 7 or 8. In that instance, it's inappropriate. So how do you make that differentiation? As it's appropriate for me as a parent to perhaps expose myself, but when it comes to another adult, for example, and like you said,
An uncle,
or an aunt, how do you make that distinction?
Well, certainly other members of the family, and it's immediate family we're talking about, so parents. But it's not exposure in the sense of what we're talking about in terms of abuse. It's basically you're comfortable in your own body, and you might walk around the house, and your child might see you naked.
I have an aunt who's very comfortable with her body and who she is, and she had 2 boys, 2 girls, and whenever she'd get ready, she'd walk around the house, she'd take a shower, so they would see this. I had a grand aunt who did not like that at all, and made it very clear that basically what you're doing is you're teaching the child to disrespect you. This is what the grand aunt said. It's almost like there's a level of disrespect that would come with that. But my aunt's children now are all grown, 20, 21, and they are all very comfortable in who they are and their bodies. We have a caller. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good
morning, Carlton.
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, good. I like the conversation I'm hearing there.
Yes,
as a matter of fact, I'll speak for my own self, and I'll speak about a friend of mine. I personally, with my boys, I felt it was okay to be naked in front of them, but with my daughter, I have never been naked in front of her. Yeah, and I would feel very uncomfortable to be naked in front of her. And I think for her, it's okay to even come and talk to me or come out of the bathroom and talk to me if she doesn't have clothes. But for me, it's not comfortable. But I like one of you all said, I think it depends on the individual family, what they choose to do. But personally, I feel comfortable more I used to feel more comfortable doing it in front of my boys than in front of my little girl. Now, I have a friend who came to ask me a question once about he being naked in front of his daughter. And I told him, because of my opinion, I figured I think that should be a no-no. And he told me one day, a customer walking around in the house naked, and he said, Charlie's maybe about 4 or 5 now, and he said one day just pull on his penis. And he felt funny, and then he came to ask me that question. So I said, I think you should not have introduced yourself to her like that, and I think she thinks it's okay for her to do that to you because you walk around like that. And I think it was an unfortunate thing to happen, in my opinion. But honestly speaking, a very good conversation, and I want to see where it goes from there.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Oh, we have another caller.
We did.
Good morning, caller.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Morning to you.
How are you all?
We're doing good.
Thank
Good.
you.
It's a very good topic. But I think it is very embarrassing for parents to be expose herself, he or she to expose herself to their children. I myself, I have never seen my children's body. They have never seen mine, and that's why how I grow my children. To me, I find it embarrassing for a man to expose himself to a daughter of his. It is very embarrassing, so I support the last caller.
Okay.
I think it doesn't look too decent, man. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your contribution.
So I have one more question. A lot of times, especially in Dominican or Caribbean culture, you might see children, little kids out
running
either
around
bathing.
naked, you're right.
It might be bathing, it might be at the beach, it might be, sometimes folks, the only access to water is a standpipe.
Yes.
So a lot of times you have little girls who's bathing or boys who are bathing out in the public view. So the question I have is, if there's this acceptable exposure, I mean, I think you can feel comfortable in your body, or you can learn to feel comfortable with your body without necessarily exposing them to your family. But then how do you teach those kids acceptable boundaries that how do, for example, if you as a grown man and you have people out there in the community who might be tempted to abuse children, and it's putting the kids out there and exposing them. It's like putting the candy out for the candy thief.
I just want to make a differentiation, however, around the issue of sexuality and sexual abuse. Because sexual abuse is not about sex. It's about power and control. And it's very important that we understand that difference, because the abuser is actually using their power to control the person, the child in this situation. And it's actually an act of aggression as opposed to love and caring, which is what sexuality is about. So they're two very different. The abuser is not necessarily sexually aroused by, it's not sexual arousal. It's around power, control, and abuse of someone, which is very different from healthy, normal sexuality. And so if a father is walking around and he sees his child naked and he starts to get in some way feeling that he can actually abuse that child, that's a whole different psychology than just a parent who is just comfortable with their body and allowing their child to learn to be comfortable with their body.
Okay. Dr. Jones, I want to ask you a question, well, maybe two. In our cultures, we often have, boys and girls, you may be bathing them together all the time. At what age do you stop bathe them together or have them sleep in the same bed as brother and sister?
Certainly, as kids get towards puberty, I think is where the turning point for them will also come in terms of their sense of wanting privacy, and that's an important thing for us to honor as well. Now, in many of our homes, the other issue in our cultures is that we have small homes, and children observe and are party to sexual behaviors and intercourse and sexual relationships in ways that many other cultures may not be exposed to in the same degree. So you will find that many of our children already know about the sexual act at very young ages, not because they've observed it or peeping into the window. Maybe you put the kids out in the yard and they're looking into the window, or they're hearing sounds, they're sleeping in the same room. So that really changes the relationship, and I think that's why a lot of the boundaries are crossed in our cultures because of that early exposure. And the other thing is, a lot of our children with handheld instruments, they're also accessing pornography, which is that's not a way to teach kids about healthy sexuality. That's not about love, that's not about getting to know someone and being comfortable with them. That's a whole other realm that they're being exposed to without the guidance from parents and without the values being put into the child's mind about what is acceptable. So we have other people teaching our children about sexuality. When we think about preschools, for example, we're sending our kids off to preschools at an unprecedented rate as compared to other generations. Who's teaching them about that sexuality piece? And is it the values that you want to teach your child? So this is why the conversation has to happen on a regular basis. It's not about a talk. I was amused by Pearl's earlier story about her grandmother, because my mother, who was a public health nurse, who should have known a lot about these things, would say to my sister and I, when we started menstruation, be careful. And we were like, traffic? What is she talking about?
Right.
We lived in Canada at the time, so I'm thinking, every time we left, as soon as we had our periods, she would say, be careful. And we always joke about this now because we have kids and we've done a whole different job around that.
Right.
But she would say, be careful. And we're like, what is she talking about? And that was what we realized, because she knew now that we could become pregnant.
Yeah,
At
that's
that
true.
stage. And some people do actually wait until the menstruation cycle to begin to have that conversation with their child. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. As I said, this should be starting from the time the kids are in diapers and having conversations around, where do babies come from? How do we answer those questions for a 2 or 3 year old? We talk about, a seed from a penis and entering the woman's vagina, and, a baby comes along because there's a love and there's intimacy and you're creating a new human being. And as they get older, you can talk a little bit more about how the sexual act happens and how the baby actually emerges. So age appropriate information is also important. But the thing about it is, nowadays we have videos, we have so much material that's available to parents that you don't have to invent it. You can actually watch a video with your child and then have discussions.
An animated or an
So-
educational
so-
video,
so-
which is true.
So someone, for example, someone would call now and ask you, so Dr. Jones, my daughter is 4 years old, and my daughter just asked me out of the clear blue sky, Mom, what is sex? What would be your answer to that parent? How would you break down the answer to that child at 4 years?
Okay, can I answer that?
Yeah.
So I will answer that because I had an interesting conversation with my son. So they were doing an activity in class and they had to name words that ended with the word X. So some children would say fox and box, and he shouted out sex. And so his teacher told me, so when we went home driving in the car, I said, so sweetheart, do you know what the word sex means? And he says, no. I said, well, where did you hear that? How do you know this? He said, I saw it on TV and I heard it in some songs. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to explain to you what the word sex means. And a lot of times what we do is he loves asking Siri on my phone questions.
Yes.
So I said, okay, well, I'm going to tell you what sex means. Sex means sexual orientation. So the differentiation between a female and a male, that's the sex. So your sex, because you're a boy, is male. My sex is female. That was the end of the conversation for me.
Now-
And then we went on to Siri. No, because I have to be realistic with him, just like Christmas, just like Santa.
Yeah.
He can grow to decide whether he wants to accept it or not, but I need to be honest with him. This is what Christmas is about, and here's what the world says Christmas is about. You make a decision when you get old. So sometimes you will hear him say, Santa not a real boy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I had to be very honest with him. Later on,
Yeah.
if the topic comes up again, then we can delve into what mommy and daddy may do, or two people who are married should be doing. You understand what I'm saying? But at that point, at 5, I figured it would be best to teach him that the medical term, that male, female, that's the sex orientation.
Okay.
And the thing about it is, if the kid is satisfied, then you've done the right answer. If they keep asking more questions, then it means that they still have more that they don't understand.
Right.
So the thing about it is that you don't want to necessarily get into any long conversations about it. Just answer as quickly as you could. So you could say, men have seeds in their penis, and that penis can be inserted into a woman's vagina, and that's often called sex. Okay. Sometimes we call it lovemaking. So that the child understands what's happening, the physical piece of it. And for a 3-4-year-old, that's it. They'll just try to figure it out. When they're 6 or 7, they might say, well, what is that? You could say, well, okay, there's when the man has, an ejaculation, which is the end of the sexual act. The seeds might come out, or you could, you call it sperm if you want. And the woman, also will have, a similar experience where, her body gets softer, juicier, and it's a loving, wonderful experience. The thing is, we have to frame this in the idea that this is about love, it's about procreation, it's about beauty.
For me, as a mom, as a parent, I have to frame it in terms of knowing that men are very logical, women are very emotional. So if I had a daughter, I may have a different discussion. But for my son, he prefers facts. He prefers the honest truth. Just tell him exactly what it is. And so when he says to me, okay, if he doesn't believe me, he'll say, let me go in the dictionary, or let me ask Siri, because Siri will bring up the dictionary and say what it means. And then Siri may say, sex means sexual orientation, male or female. Then he'll be very satisfied. So I actually approach it based on the fact that men are very logical. It's either black or white. This is it. There are no in-betweens.
I have a question about that. Because, I think both men and women are human. And so men might be more logical, but there is an emotional aspect to your son. So the question is, do you allow him to be the full breadth and also give him the emotional aspect as well?
Absolutely. I'm very big on emotion and showing how you feel and dealing with your feelings and having those conversations. So how are you feeling? It's not just about reacting. Talk to me. Communicate what you're thinking, what you're feeling at this very moment.
Okay.
And then we do have those discussions. But he's 5, so it's about teaching him,
Yes.
as we go along. We do have a caller.
Yes.
Good morning, caller.
Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Lando.
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and a special good morning to Dr. Jones, and pleasant good morning to your other friend.
Yes.
Your other guest, sorry.
Yes.
Your other guest. Thank you for reading my mind. You asked one of the questions I was supposed to be asking about when do you, your boys and girls start sleeping in different rooms and you start bathing them in different bathrooms, or let them cover up themselves when they bathe. So thanks for asking that question for me. But I have another question though to Dr. Jones. Don't you think it is a level of disrespect to be walking in the home naked in front of your children? I can understand if you come from the bathroom or something like that and you are naked, you don't go and run and hide and so. But to be deliberately walking in front of them naked, do you think is a level of disrespect?
It depends on the values of the family, and each family has to make those decisions for themselves. The body is part of who we are, and it's not that you're going to be walking around all day necessarily naked, but some people may choose to do that for certain periods of time in their household. Again, what we often set up when we sort of do that kind of quick cover up is that somehow there's something shameful about our body, or that it's something that we should not honor. Again, it depends on your family and how comfortable you are with you. There are many wives who don't show their bodies to their husbands. They have sex in the dark. Now, that, can be...
True.
I don't know. I mean, I've had, I do a lot of counseling with couples, and I tell you, the men don't like that. I mean, they want to see their woman's body, and it feels wrong because often there's a lot of shame coming from the women, and so they're not actually then fully engaged in the intimacy that is part of the couple's relationship, and so that. Usually there's something, somewhere along the line, the woman has felt shameful about her body. And that's unfortunate because that will usually be transmitted to the next generation.
But for myself personally, I wouldn't walk around deliberately just naked. There are times when, and it always seems to happen when I'm in the bathroom or just when I put down the towel to jump into, somebody has a question for me and it's like, no, don't come in, like, hello, that kind of thing. There are parents like that where there's some that would just stand there naked and say, yes, let me give you a cup of tea, and no, that's, but everybody is different, and because I have boys, so I feel that it's a very sensitive.
Can I make a comment? I mean, like my mother was very liberal with us. Even now, as an adult, I would go to my mother's house, and if it's very hot, she might just pull on her skirt down and have her breast lie down on the bed, and I could have a conversation with her. And it's like I wouldn't even be looking at my mother's breast. It wouldn't even be on my mind at all.
Because you've seen it so
much.
So
I think I understand what Dr. Jones is saying.
But no, you have to understand, because like she said, it depends on every family's values. Some people are not built like that. Some people are, and I think it has a lot to do with respect. A lot of parents feel that their children should have a certain amount of respect for them, and that would then filter outside of the home. So
I have a question, just to change the subject a little bit. So we've spoken about exposure, but I wanted to talk about good touch, bad touch, and at what age do you start that conversation, and how do you discuss good touch, bad touch? So it might be okay whether you choose or not to expose yourself in front of your family, but then the touching aspect, when it's good, when it's bad.
Well, we've come up with the good touch, bad touch concept, but the idea of bad touch is also something that, I don't support the idea of bad touch, but I do, what it is boundaries. So as a child, your body is yours, and there are certain boundaries and there's certain ways that no one, including your parents, should interact with your body. So good touch is, you can touch yourself at any point and all parts of your body, and that's good touch. But hugging a child is good touch. Cuddling a child is good touch. But if a parent or an uncle or somebody decides to go into touching the child's breasts or touching the child's penis, and we have to remember vagina. Boys too. We have to remember boys in this whole discussion too, because we often think only of girls. And I've had many experiences since I've been here in Dominica of men who have talked about aunts and cousins, female cousins, who have abused them. So we often forget them as people who may be experiencing those things. So the idea is, we sometimes also say to children, the only other people that can touch our bodies is doctors. But I find that to be very interesting.
Only when mommy or daddy are present.
Yes, exactly. So that's the other thing, because we always say doctors, but then we don't sort of help the kids understand that the doctor can't just do that, on their own. So somehow that's another important piece. And the other part is that we. Pearl was talking about that earlier, which is very important. As soon as the child is able to wash their body parts, then let them do that. So you don't have to be involved with that.
Yeah, you teach them.
You teach them, so that there is no need for dad or mom or uncle or anyone to be touching your private parts. Also in the schools, teachers and other professionals are also having access to our children. So it's not just even family members as well. So we just have to tell them if they feel. The other thing we have to teach children is that if they feel uncomfortable, because sometimes we'll make children hug, or go and hug uncle somebody, and they don't feel comfortable hugging that person. So we need to tell them, if they don't feel comfortable in a situation, to trust their instincts.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's a good point.
I was actually applauding Dr. Jones, because this is something that I've seen growing up in my family. Anyone who was in the house, when we came in, we had to kiss, we had to hug, we had to greet, and it made our parents feel very good that their children are very respectful and well mannered. But guess what?
Yeah.
This is a different ball game with my child, because I know that generations before me, and even some in my generation, were abused by these same people that they hugged and kissed. Listen, if my son is not comfortable, I don't care who you are. If my son is not comfortable with speaking to you or even saying hello or shaking your hand, I will never force him to do that. There's no way.
And one of the other things that we note is that children who are more susceptible to abuse are the children who feel that they have no one they can tell when something has happened. So often, kids, they will sense whether the parents will believe them. If it's an uncle or a priest or a minister or somebody, if the parent, and often what happens is the parents don't believe the child. That's the worst thing you can do, is to actually secondarily abuse a child by not believing them.
I like the way you put that.
Yes.
I love the way you put that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of the stories that really struck me with Leve Dominique was this young woman who was talking about, in many of our cultures, we have this child lending practice where we lend our daughter to an aunt and we lend a son to an uncle and whatever. She was being lent to a bachelor neighbor. Every night she was sent to sleep with a bachelor neighbor.
Because he was getting older. Or
Yes.
whatever it is, maybe. Mhm.
But around 6 or 7, he started to abuse her, and she attempted many times to tell her mother, and her mother would say, "Be quiet, I don't believe you, you're lying," and kept sending her across. Now she's an adult, and she says, "What parent would do that to a child?" It's a really what were they thinking? And who was there to protect that child? She had no one to share that with. She did share it with her mom, and she told her she was lying. And they continued to send her until she was about 14. So again, we have to be really willing to hear what the child is saying, because sometimes they'll ask questions, and they may say, "Well, what do you think about sex?" But really, what they're asking is, "I'm thinking about starting sex, having sex." They want to hear from you, So you have to look beyond what they're asking sometimes.
Right. And I'm so thankful. My eldest son, who was 16 at the time, came to me and wanted to have the conversation about sex. And we did. And, I said to him, why do you want to have this conversation? And he said, well, everybody in school is talking about it. And do you think you can purchase condoms for me? So I said, are you preparing to do this? Like, seriously? He said, no. But what if I'm put in a situation? What if I need to be protected? And I thought, this is very uncomfortable for me. But I said, you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense. And so what we did was we had to purchase a wallet first. I said to him, because you can't just walk around with condoms. So I want to make sure that you have a wallet. But thankfully, we ordered the wallet online, and the wallet took almost a year to come. So I was saved by the bell with that one.
Well, that's a good, because we see that a lot. School boys come in and they buy condoms, and sometimes they feel that you're still looking at them like you're judging them, like because they're buying condoms and they have uniforms on.
That's great. We should be applauding them for doing that.
And that's a question that I had, because I knew of a pharmacist who would not sell condoms or perhaps contraceptives if students came in their school uniforms, failing to realize they were actually doing them, the students and themselves, a disservice. Because who would you prefer? You would prefer to have a student out there, they're sexually active, but they're using protection. If they don't use protection, or they don't have access to protection, then they might be spreading an STD,
or they
might get pregnant.
Right.
So actually, there's some families who would actually, when the boys are about, let's say, 16, 17, who would keep condoms in the home. So that they knew where to find them if that came up.
And girls should also be taught to have condoms. You shouldn't be relying on the man to have the condoms, because oftentimes guys will buy condoms and they cut a hole through the top of the condom. So again, there is a female condom. It hasn't really taken off to the same degree that perhaps the male condom has, but women should also be taught to have condoms available.
Dr. Jones, I do have a question though. Do you think that the Dominican society, in terms of carnival and the music that we put out there, even in the media, plays a role in inappropriate sexual messages to children? Do you think?
Yes.
Well, certainly in our culture, visitors have I remember when I lived in St. Kitts, visitors would, I worked at a nursing school, and we had a lot of overseas students, and they would be like, they couldn't really understand the dancing.
I know.
And they were like, it looks like they're having sex on the road.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would say, well, yeah, it kind of looks that way, but it's sort of part of the culture. I think the bigger concern is that conversation that you have with your children. and the way you dress your children. A lot of parents dress their daughters in very sexual ways, midriff tops and 3 and 4 year olds between the belly, and boys looking like gangsters.
Yeah.
And that I think is more the important question. What are you teaching your child? And mothers and fathers, what are you wearing outside of the house? So you're talking to your teenage daughter about her dress, but then when you look at the mother's dress, you think, well, where did she get that from?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
again, it's all starts in the home and having that dialogue and inserting your values. So I don't think just the music and the carnival thing is it has an influence.
Yes.
Of course, music has an influence now,
Absolutely.
on young people, and they're free to listen to music and those sort of overtures. I think it's more about having that conversation about what is appropriate in our communities and your own family as well.
Okay.
I have a question and comment about that, because if you look at especially some of the dancehall music that comes out and some of the videos that come out, I mean, they're not just music videos. Some of them are straight up pornography. So if a lot of our teenagers are really engaged and watch these videos, really and truly, they're being educated, and there are a lot of messages that are being sent. So one of my questions was that, in this day and age where we have so much information reaching our kids, oftentimes before we are able to reach them, how can we teach especially our young men to be respectful of young women and respect their body autonomy? Because if we look at some of the cases that come out in the media about the rape cases that happen on the island, you really have to think what was going through these men's minds. Not only, but what information are we feeding them as young boys that would allow them to take advantage of these young women who might be inebriated, or even their relatives. So some of the actions can only be classified as barbaric. So what are we teaching our young men, and how do we correct that?
Well, sexual abuse, as I mentioned earlier, it's a whole different mentality. Again, young boys being exposed to pornography early, they're learning ways of interacting in intimacy that is not appropriate. So, one of the things that we did in many of our territories in the last couple of years is to provide tablets for raging hormone children and teenagers. And they are then able to access sites that we as parents don't have control over. But again, you still have the opportunity to talk to your sons and your daughters about what they're seeing, and to have some conversations around, you also need to be modeling as a family, husband, wife, partner, appropriate relations with your partner. So young boys are going to pick up more about what they see in the home being exhibited than what's in those videos. The home is where most of this starts, and unless we provide that discussion, dialogue, sort of saying, hey, no, that's not how you treat a woman, but they're looking at their dads to see how they're treating their mothers. That's what they're looking at most, and that's what's going to be the strongest influence. But the other influences are definitely more bombarding us than ever before. But that's why these conversations are even more critical going forward.
Well, I like that you said that, because the influences do bombard our children. I mean, there are so many influences out there. For me, as a Christian at home, we try to teach, waiting until you're married to have, intercourse and things like that. But we're dealing with so much. Our children are dealing with so much out there. So we should really look at the reality and arm them and teach them the right way.
Right.
And this is basically what this is about.
And the abstinence message has not worked. Something like 80% of 19-year-olds have had sex. Yeah. So very few of them will make it to 20 without having had sex. So if we don't realize that and work towards providing them with information about STDs, the other thing that we can do for teenagers is really to get them involved in things that they're passionate about, sports or music, so that and then you have the conversations about, are you ready to be a parent?
Yeah.
And not just for women, for the girls, but for the boys as well. Too. Because, if you're not ready to be a parent, if you're going to have to pay child support, I know a lot of schools in various territories in North America, for example, will have classes where teenagers are actually taught what it's like to be a parent. they have to do the diapering, they have to do, get the food.
That's right.
So it gives them a sense about the responsibility of being a parent, because when they're having sex, they're not thinking about pregnancy and parenting. They're just thinking about meeting basic human needs at that point. And remember, teenagers are also, everything is spontaneous. So preparing them by saying, okay, if you're going to engage in sex, these are the dangers, these are the possibilities. How can you protect yourself? If we want to say that, we should have abstinence, and we can do that, but those messages are not being listened to by them.
That's true.
Well,
I, before we do close, I know we're running behind, but before we do close, just to sum up what Dr. Jones, had shared with us today, for those of you just tuning in, here are some things parents can do. Encourage children to speak up. Teach your child about boundaries. Teach them how to talk about their bodies. Having the body talk is very important. Be available to them. Don't just shun them or shut them down every time they come to talk to you. Let them know that they won't get in trouble when they do come. Give them the chance to raise new topics. So sometimes asking direct questions like, did you have fun and was it a good time? Will give you the answers that you may need. Think beyond stranger danger, because it's not just the strangers. The people who are closest to our children do abuse our children. And don't keep any secrets. This is something that we didn't touch a lot on today, but we, even in my home, we do not keep any secret. There are no secrets. So nobody can say to my son, listen, you ate a piece of candy, don't tell mommy today. No, I'm totally against that. And don't ignore family history. I think that we all need to look at.
Yeah.
If my mother was abused, then there's a chance that if she didn't have the conversation with me, then that would have happened to me. So parents, have the talk. It's very important that we have these discussions. Don't think that it happened in the past, and so you don't want to talk about it, because a lot of parents have been abused but will refuse to let their children know that this has actually happened to them. Another thing that we didn't talk about was sleepovers. I don't take sleepovers very lightly at all.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have to be careful about the supervision of our children.
Yes.
And sleepovers are certainly something I wouldn't encourage parents to be doing these days. It's a very different world in that regard. And these situations often happen when the children are unsupervised.
That's right.
Okay? And trusting people without them earning that trust.
That's right. The other thing is, we may sometimes be naive in thinking that predators are only adults. There are children predators too.
Yes.
So just because this person is my child's friend, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be comfortable with leaving them alone together, because you don't know what the other child is being influenced. By or exposed to.
One other thing that's really particular in our culture is that we have a lot of half siblings. So we have a child mother here, a child father there, and people, so they may not think of themselves as brothers and sisters in the same way, and that's a real situation where a lot of that kind of exploration beyond the proper boundaries happen. It's another topic, but
Yeah, but I recognize that we do have to, for the upcoming year, 2017, we will be focusing a lot on family values, and because it's a form of wellness, and the whole, there's been so much talk on the marginalization of men. How do you? It's like re-socialize a young man to live a more purposeful life. These are areas. I mean, you mentioned so much about the fashion and how it influences your whole livelihood in terms of how you think and how you behave. And so those are areas that we definitely would explore in the upcoming shows for 2017. Let me again thank Dr. Lisa Jolly for being on today, Dr. Sybil Allen Jones for being on today. I'm your host, Carlton.
And I'm Pearl Fontaine.
And let us say Merry Christmas to all our listeners.
Right.
And, it's our last show before,
before Christmas, but not for the year.
Not for the year.
Right.
So you really want to say to you, have a Merry Christmas. Do everything responsibly and in moderation. Have good rest. Drink lots of water and watch the amount of ham and turkey that you consume this holiday season. Be safe, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Health Vibes. You were listening to Health Vibes.